Very good afternoon, Stats Race Lens users, and those are interested in utilizing Stats Race Lens. We're together again as we move toward Derby and Oaks. The last stop on the prep circuit, the lead up, takes us to Oaklawn. Their season ends on Saturday. A lot of ways, a lot of things are just getting going in earnest. We're coming off of a really good seminar 2 weeks ago that I think put you on some nice horses, including that maiden winner and Gervin and much more. Tonight, Dan Tordjman and Craig Walker, I think Ellis Starr is sitting in as well. So we welcome everybody and are looking forward to a terrific card at Oaklawn, the Arkansas Derby, big full field. A lot to talk about there, but the Northern Spur, the Oaklawn Handicap as well, and more. And we're going to get into it. Let me say hello to Dan Tordjman. First of all, Dan, good evening.
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
Terrific. And the spring has arrived, and with it comes the lead up to the Classic season. Craig Walker out in California, it's spring 12 months a year.
Yeah, pretty much. But except for this year, we did have a lot more rain than usual, but still nice. Yeah.
Well, it's nice that we're together again, and we're going to actually start with that Northern Spur tonight. And we're going to turn to Dan, first of all, and talk about the other race for the 3-year-olds. And, Dan, what do you like?
Yeah, I found this to be a little bit of a tricky race. I would say that I think it's cool that a couple of weeks back I was actually at Oaklawn on Rebel Stakes Day, so I had the benefit of watching several of the horses that come back on Saturday, and one of those horses was Warriors Club. So go ahead and open this up. I'll go to Warriors Club right here. If you look at the race, I mean, well, if you want to back up a little bit, I mean, you could look last year where he was, obviously pointed toward the Triple Crown Trail. Kentucky Jockey Club came back this year, ran the Smarty Jones. Didn't run all too bad. And then, he comes, you look here 2 back where he ran in the Southwest, finished 11th at that point. I think they probably just said, let's try to get this horse, let's try to get this horse's confidence up. So they run him in that allowance optional claimer on Rebel Stakes Day, and he really ran a nice race. That was the first time Castellano was up. Ended up winning by a couple of lengths. The other cool thing about this horse is he's part of that Churchill Downs Racing Club, where Churchill Downs has, people could buy in for $500 and they get a stake in the horse. They come out and they get these really big winner's circles. So an interesting horse. This 96 Equibase speed figure here was the highest is the highest for any horse in the race at this distance and surface, which you can see by just hovering over the number right there. And so, I mean, look, if the horse runs back to that effort, I think he's a major player based on that alone, based on that number alone, and based on how good he looked, being in against some horses that were maybe more at his level. One of the other interesting horses that I want to take a look at here is the 2, Colonel's Dark Temper. This one is the most lightly raced horse in the field, and I wanted to show the replay of the last race here. Here we go. Colonel's Dark Temper is going to be the 6th horse, and you're going to see that he ends up getting to the lead. And the thing is, I don't know if he wanted to be on the lead, though. It kind of a strangely run race in a sense. He breaks well, gets to the lead. That's him right there on the lead. And then he gives it up pretty easily to Love That Loot. Gary Stevens was on at 17-1, and that was another thing we laughed about after the race. We see Gary Stevens getting off a horse at 17-1 at Oaklawn, who wins this race. How did we miss that, and how many times has that happened before? But anyhow, just kind of take a look at, he's going along pretty easy pace. He's going along well, 24 flat. And then Steven just says go with his long shot, and the horse goes. And Colonel's Dark Temper is headed here, but what impresses me here is that he doesn't just fade, and he doesn't just back out of it. You'll see here he's going to let Love That Loot go by, and so you would expect now, especially as the other ones start to move in on him, that he's going to finish last or way out of it. But he doesn't. He continues to battle on, and just kind of go through this a little bit. That's still him on the rail right there, still plugging away. And he ends up finishing third. He gets nosed out for second there. And if you watch there on the gallop out, he's still running on fairly well. So I thought this was a sneaky, good effort, and that's him right there. And again, just his second career race, comes back here in the field, in which I don't really see any real standout. So I thought he was interesting potentially, and that's why I kind of took a look at him. The only other one that I'll mention here is going to be Sistron, a horse with a lot of speed, and could be the main speed, I would imagine. I don't really see any other ones with that much early foot, aside from potentially Colonel's Dark Temper. And just sort of an interesting play. I mean, coming in from Santa Anita, turf to dirt. I know Craig has some notes that he was going to point out here as well. And I'll kick it over to Craig to talk a little bit about this horse and a couple of the horses he likes.
Yeah, so with Sistron, when you can look and see on the underneath the trainer John Sadler's name where it has a turf to dirt, and you can see out of 19 starters he has a 32% winners, 63% in the money, and a plus 29% ROI. So that means that obviously there's many times when he takes a horse off the turf, goes and puts it on the dirt, and the horse is live. So they're legged up and they're ready to go. The only kind of question mark about it for me a little bit is that this horse has run his last 4 races on the turf, and they've all been solid efforts. So I'm not sure exactly why they're going back to the dirt with this horse. It seems like they would keep going on the turf with them, because that horse that he ran third behind, that Conquest Fahrenheit, is a really nice horse. So I'm not sure exactly why they're going back to the dirt, but his stats are good. So that horse I would keep him in the mix. With Warriors Club, as Dan had noted, I do like that the last race that he ran was the best for a dirt route for anyone in the field. That's what the green circle means around that horse. Anytime a horse runs like the highest speed figure like that in his last race for the field, or if that speed figure is higher than the class rating is up in the race header where it has stakes and then the distance and the surface. Right below that where it says CR, that's the class rating. So in today's race, the class rating is a 97 for the race. And so that last race was 96. So anytime that it's right around that number or higher, that's always a good sign. And so that's an angle that I'm always looking for. And then the only other horse I liked a little bit was Total Tap, number 7. And it's a Asmussen horse that seems like he needed that last race. So I would expect him to run back to the race that he ran before that, more than likely. One of the things I like about him is the jockey, Luis Contreras. Have a stat for him at dirt routes at Oaklawn Park in the past year. He's had 55 starts and he has a 24% win percent. So he's a lot of times he's an over, and it's also slightly positive ROI of plus 4%. So he's kind of a jockey that gets overlooked sometimes. A lot of times when he's on a horse that I like, they seem to perform well, and so he's kind of a jockey that I like to play a lot of the time at different tracks, but at Oaklawn for sure is one of those tracks. So that's what I had for this race.
I envy you, Craig. I haven't had the same luck with Luis Contreras in my day. How about you, Steve?
Well, yeah, it's funny. Donnie Von Hemel is so loyal to him, and they've had success. He's a guy that if you watch him, he's a guy that's tough to inspire confidence in certain circumstances. But if you're dismissive of him, it seems there's certain conditions and horses that he does all right with. But I understand the reticence. On that topic, Craig, while you've got control of the screen, let's go back to Sistron and let's show people how they can delve into a guy like John Sadler, who is away from Southern California. This has been a black hole for Sadler for a while, and he's very open about it. For whatever reason, when he leaves now Del Mar and Santa Anita, it is a disaster, and it's going back probably the breadth of the race blend information. So if you can show people how they could look, because they'll hear that certainly on Saturday when we talk about, we're not going to look at the apple blossom for tomorrow, but people tomorrow, one of the things you're going to hear is how bad Sadler is away from his home circuit. And here's a way Craig's going to show you how to create that information at your fingertips.
Craig, do you want me to pass it over to you, or do you want me to show it this way?
Sure. No, you can show it the way that you're doing.
You can do it, Dan.
All right. Yeah. So basically, if you follow what I was doing, I just clicked John's name, and then I modified. I clicked to modify it to update it. And what you could do is under shippers here, you just click all shippers. If you wanted to get more specific, you could do domestic shippers or foreign shippers. But for the sake of this one, let's just do all shippers. Steve mentioned going back, as far back as we want. We could go back up to 5 years here. We could also do 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, or just the past 30 days. Let's do 5 years to get a sort of a larger sample, and then we can go ahead and apply that. And okay, well that's a bigger number, so we could narrow it down. As you see, 860 starts, 19% win percentage. Let's modify. Let's look over the past couple of years.
That's the problem. The problem you've got with that is that's including things like down to Del Mar, as opposed to leaving the circuit.
Right.
And if you exclude the home circuit, and see if you can't, if that option isn't existing. Track filter, let's see, use all track.
Yeah. The best way to do it is on the include circuit list.
Mm-hmm.
And then just pick, New York. Just pick the main. Pick Florida, Kentucky, right? And then pick
Arkansas, Louisiana.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, just go to Arkansas. Yeah, and that should be good enough. Yeah, and then just say okay. Yep.
All right.
There we go.
And apply.
This is still the past 2 years. I mean, I can open up the sample a little bit more after. So let me go back to the past 5 years. Apply that. And there you go.
Yeah.
23 starts, 1 win.
1 win.
Only 7 in the money. So, yep. I think you illustrated that point fairly well right there.
And this is an extreme, and Sadler frankly can't explain it either. And it's not as if he's operating on a circuit where the medications are permissive. It's a very strange circumstance, and we're talking about him shipping some really good horses. So it's a bit of a mystery, and you look through that list. I mean, look what you're dealing with there.
Stellar win.
Back.
Yeah.
Candy Boy, Hard Aces.
Yeah.
It's a list of nice horses. I mean, even Stellar Wind is 0 for 2 away from the West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say now, one. To be honest, one of course was that narrow beat in the distaff to Pletcher to the Rapoli, but so it's not like they haven't run well in place.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a cautionary. It's something to be aware of. And you can, if you're curious about things like this, and you see, some names in venues, that, and Keeneland right now, for instance, you're seeing a lot of people shipping in. And this weekend at Keeneland again, after Tim Yaktine came in and with big score last week, and and won nicely. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting, and I did a different search, and we'll get to this race a little later, the Count Fleet, which is the race before this, because he's got another one that looks interesting in Mo Candy, and I did a similar search looking at past couple of years in dirt sprints shipping in, and the numbers came out just about the same. So, but we can get back to that race. Do we want to just hop over now to the big race? Do we want to, dig into the to the Derby?
Arkansas Derby. Yep.
All right, let's get to it. So, for me, at least, I look at this race and I see a couple of different issues. I see a couple of horses here who look good on paper and who run well coming in, but who I think might have some limitations, either based on pedigree or post. It's a really tricky field, and I don't even think that I figured out the way the pace sets up for this race either. It's a tricky race. I know it's not very helpful, but the one thing that I do know for sure is that this horse down on the rail is trained by Doug O'Neill, and who has had much different success shipping in, especially for stakes races, as we saw last week with IRAP pulling the miracle of all miracles in the Bluegrass Stakes. That's just one example. But this horse, Rockin' Rudy, and like I said, if you don't know anything else about any of these horses here, you got a horse drawn the rail who has shown speed in every single start, including the last two, which were on the turf. But certainly don't write him off for that. His maiden breaker here was by 11.5 lengths on the dirt at Del Mar. So I just found this horse to be a bit interesting, and I'm not really quite sure if I envisioned myself selecting a maiden-winning Iowa bred to win one of the most important Derby prep races. But I've got a few reasons. One, again, is knowing at least for sure that he'll find himself on the lead, especially stretching out here. You've got Malagasy and Conquest Mo Money with some speed on the outside, so I would imagine they're going to try to cross over. But I would imagine that Malagasy is also going to, and I'm probably butchering that name, Malagasy, would imagine he's going to try to, Javier will try to kind of put the horse in the same kind of position that he had him last time. But Conquest Mo Money could complicate things potentially. He's got some speed. He was caught really wide in the Sunland Derby last out. Jockey moved obviously pretty early on him, and he just ended up getting caught. But thought he ran a decent race, and actually is somewhat intriguing to me. He was 4.5 lengths clear of Hedge Fund. So bouncing around a little bit, but let me go back to Rockin' Rudy, and I was going to pull some numbers here that I thought might be of interest. So let's start with Doug O'Neill, who I'd mentioned. Obviously, I think we just sort of know that he's done, and again, you go into Modify if you want to check how he does in certain circumstances, that we know just from recent history with Nyquist, with IRAP, with many others, that he's done well. He does all right when his horse is ship. So let's go to past 2 years. And let's go specifically to narrow it down. Let's go to dirt races. shippers. Let's use all shippers. And then, you know, let's just make it as specific as possible here. Let's do graded stakes. We could also check just grade 1s or grade 2s, but let's go all graded stakes. I'm going to take off the flanker qualifier. So take off the third off the layoff. I mean, there's so many options here. You can do any number of searches based on what you think is most important. I'm going to just take out those variables, but you could specify it all the way down to, you know, the distance, days between starts, all the stuff here that you're seeing. If you use stats, you know that you have all these options. But if you haven't used it before and you're looking at this, I mean, you could spend hours on any individual race just playing through all the different scenarios and all the different search functions. So let's go ahead and apply that. And what you see here is over the past 2 years, on the dirt, all shippers and graded stakes, you're looking at 47 starts, 10 wins, and a 21% win percentage, 20 in the money. So those numbers are fairly, I mean, those look strong to me. And I think you'll recognize a lot of these horses if you want to see which ones have won. You've got Bailout Bobby, you've got Gomo, IRAP, who I mentioned earlier, Landover C, Nyquist, Rallis, won at Saratoga. So, you know, I think we've illustrated the point here. Doug O'Neill is dangerous, no matter where his horses are running, especially this time of year. And so I think you got to respect that. You've got a horse stretching out from 6.5 furlongs to this 1.125 distance. And in terms of pedigree, this I found somewhat interesting as well. Midshipman in particular, dirt, first route, 57 starters, 19 winners out of those 57 starters, 33% win percentage, 58% in the money. And, you know, it's a large enough sample where I think that that's a significant number. I don't know. I mean, people can apply that number as they see fit, but certainly this doesn't make me hesitant to back Rock and Rudy. If anything, it might inspire a little bit of confidence. And the dam, Ruthie the Rocket, she had several winners going long. If you can actually look at her individual PPs by clicking View Dam PPs over here, and you can see that she won at a mile 70 yards, granted at Prairie Meadows, an allowance race there. But nonetheless, I don't see any limitations here, especially, again, noting that some of the progeny here have either won or finished in the money as well. So, yeah, a couple of, you know, just sort of positive signs here with this horse in a race where I'm not sure that I see much else that actually scares me. I think Malagasy, I'm not as confident in this horse going 1 1/8. He did it well last out. He's certainly cranked up and ready to go. I have some concerns about him in this spot. If I'm going to give you one other price, it's probably going to be Petrov. Petrov, I thought, might have slightly regressed, and the Equibase speed figures certainly reflect a slight regression from the Southwest Stakes to the Rebel, the 111 here turning into a 103. Petrov really had no excuse as far as I was concerned in the Rebel. I liked him that day. He sat a nice, you know, stalking trip, saved ground. Everything opened up for him. I thought he was going to run on and blow by them, but he didn't. The other thing that I like here, normally I wouldn't say, oh, I like Jose Ortiz hopping off a horse and Ricardo Santana for as good as he is hopping on, but Ricardo Santana is a local rider who obviously does really well at Oaklawn. The Ortiz brothers, both of them on Rebel Stakes Day, were having some trouble, to put it kindly. They did not have their most memorable day, that day in particular. And so I like Ricardo in this spot. I think it's a positive move, and I don't think it'll hurt the horse at all. Yeah, I mean, I think if we can call this a slight bounce, this Southwest to Rebel regression, and we think that he could get back to performing at that Southwest level or maybe a little better, I think he's got a real shot. Remember, he was 8 1/4 lengths clear of Looking at Lee, who, you know, is still getting hype here. We know Looking at Lee, one thing he does is, you know, he's like playing Gary Glenn Ross, always closing, and so we know that he's going to run into it. But people are, if you like looking at Lee, I don't know. I would think that you would potentially like Petrov, who was 8.25 clear of him last time they matched up. So anyway, those are the ones that I have my eyes on. I do like Rockin' Rudy a bit. Petrov could potentially be a price and overlooked. And these two on the outside, I don't want to. I don't want to say don't use them. I have some concerns with either of them winning. And then the big one that we'll talk about here in a moment will be Classic Empire. Craig, I'm going to pass this over to you. Craig?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Let's see. That. There you are. Got it?
Yeah, just 1 second. Can you guys see my screen now?
I got you on Classic Empire?
Yes. Yes, on Classic Empire. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Classic Empire, I just wanted to take a quick look at him. He's not really one of my top selections, but what I did just want to show about him is that this is a type of horse that you have to look at just to see if he may come back to the speed figure that he ran before. So we see in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the horse ran 116 Equibase speed figure, which is the best of any of the horses in this field. The downside is, of course, is that this horse hasn't been running much this year. So the first time out, it ran the 96. I mean, normally on the Derby Trail, you'd want at least one other start, so the horse could be making some progress and getting fit. And so I do expect the horse to run better than he did last time, but I still just don't think that he's going to be at a peak effort today. The other horse that's going to be low odds is Malagasy. And one thing that I can look with him is in that Rebel Stakes, in Racelands, we have the track bias designations out to the right before the field size. So the F plus means that that it was a strong front running track. So and when you mouse over it, it tells you. And then the N means none. That means the path. So if we look at this one that's an F and an R, the race before, the F means that it was a front running bias and that the rail was the best place to be. So always in Racelands, if you have it activated for the track bias, you can always look out over here, and that's going to help you maybe analyze some of the past races of a horse. So that day was a strong front running bias. And then also, when you click on the chart of this race, we can see that the class rating is a 111. That's what we would expect the winning Equibase speed figure to be for that race going into the race. It ended up being a 106 is what Malagasy ran. When we look at the early pace figures and the middle pace figures of 94, 98, those would also be expected to be closer to 111 in a normal type of stakes race, grade 2 at this level for 3-year-olds. And so with those being slower, that tells you that the pace was slow and that the track was playing towards front runners. So the closers were really up against it, that race. And so that's why for me there's a couple of horses that could improve off of that if things are different today. And the first one is Sonneteer. I mean, that horse, if you watch the replay, you'll see that horse, got shuffled at the start. It's hard for him to get position, and then he came down the rail at the end of the race and ran a brave race, ran second, and so he can easily turn the tables at big odds. And then the other horse that I wanted to look at was number 9, Untrapped. And the main thing here that I like is what Ellis has talked about in the past is just when they're making changes on a horse, they're trying to look for improvement. So the blinkers on and switch to, probably the biggest money rider right now running, Mike Smith, in the big races. He's the guy who's going to come through a lot of the time for you. So those two changes, especially like the change from Ortiz after Dan was saying that didn't have the greatest of days on Rebel Stakes Day. Those two changes there, I'd look for improvement on that horse as well. So that's how I'm looking at the race. I don't know who did you like, Steve?
I like Silver Dust, and I'm going to bet Silver Dust in every slot.
What number is that?
The 3.
3. Okay. So.
Silver Dust. Randy Morse, who trained Jonesboro, is a very conservative horseman, and he's brought Silver Dust along really, really nicely. And the fact that he debuted this colt at a mile, the 1-turn mile at Churchill, is an indication that they never expected this horse to be fast early or a win early type. Took him a second start to break his maiden. Even on the Beyer scale, on any measurement you use, he's been getting better with each passing start. It's his 3rd start off the layoff. They're going to add blinkers, partial blinkers, to try to get him involved a little bit earlier. And if you go back and you watch his Rebel in the Southwest, you can see a couple of different issues. In the Southwest, he was a little fresh, a little eager, kind of up on heels. He got a little frustrated with Lannery, and ran a funny race in spurts, basically. Came back in the Rebel and was kind of even all the way around. And I can't blame Morse for adding blinkers here to get him a little bit more focused. It's just, we've seen this Tappet storyline over and over again, that they need maturity mentally and physically. And if you saw the workout the other day, the pre-workout on ExpressBet TV, he he did something very quirky and kind of humorous. They were walking to the gate for a gate workout, and all of a sudden he drops his right shoulder to throw the jock over his head, and he didn't do it to then run away. He did it, I think, in part for fun, and then he just stood there and kind of laughed. And this is a horse that clearly is going to need to mature, and you're going to get him at an enormous price. He's got a terrific circumstance being in the 3-hole, knowing the Classic Empire and Rockin' Ruby are going to clear. That sets up Corey Lannery in the exact spot where Lannery excels, which is saving ground every step. And Silver Dust is gonna sit a very handy 5th here, maybe 6th, maybe even as close as 3rd or 4th, depending on what happens outside. Petrov is probably going to want to be in behind the speed as well, and the 2 outside, Conquest Mo Money and Malagasi, they're both going to try to at least gain position before the turn. So Silver Dust isn't going to be worse than about 6th here early, and it's all a matter of getting a clean trip. But this is a race where you've got a whole bunch of horses that have distance questions. I won't question Classic Empire's talent or Malagasi. I think he's very talented. The other horses that you're looking at, like Petrov and even a Rockin' Rudy, who may be getting good at the right time. The mile in the 8th is the deciding factor here, and Silver Dust is bred absolutely beautifully for this. He's got siblings. He's actually the first foal out of his dam. Solar Laoro. She was a stake winner. She also is a sister to Goulding's Green, who was a terrific router, multiple graded stake winner on I think on every surface, maybe on dirt, synthetic, and grass. there's a lot to like about this horse from a distance standpoint, and I think you want somebody in this race that is really built for 1.8 miles, because I got a feeling that because of the horses on the outside, that the pace is going to get a little bit hotter than you might expect at first glance. So I want a horse that is going to either stalk and go, or a horse that's going to be in the second flight. I would think on track, and looking at Lee, I know people are going to go back probably to Sonnet here, but at 25 to 1, Silver Dust is the right horse at the right price.
Hey, Steve, let me throw out one little nugget here. I was actually talking to a friend yesterday who lives in Arkansas and kind of keeps close tabs on one of the things that you mentioned, which is, the works and specifically, how different Silver Dust has looked since adding the blinkers. He told me that the info he had, and I don't know if he actually observed it himself or not, was that he'd been working, Silver Dust had been working with a horse out of the Morse barn named Conquest Wildcat. Since we've been on, Conquest Wildcat just a little while ago finished second to Recruiting Ready in the Bachelor Stakes, and according to the person that I spoke to, Silver Dust has been just easily outworking him. And so for whatever that's worth, however much stock you put into that, the horse that he's been working with just finished second in a stakes race at Oaklawn since we've been on. So that's certainly a positive sign, and I guess would back up some of what you just mentioned.
Nice.
Yep.
So before we jump to the Oaklawn Handicap, I just wanted to point out one new tiny feature that we added this week. So up on any of the screens that you're on in Racelands, up in the top right corner now, we added this new icon, and that's for any Racelands subscribers. It's a message board that we've set up now. So any user, when they're in Racelands, can click on that, get access to the message board, and it's a place where Ellis and I and other people will answer questions, and then other Stats Racelands users, they can share their experience, things that have worked for them. They get answers to questions that maybe they're looking for, and they can help each other out. And it's just something that we wanted to add to build as the community of Racelands users is building up to get answers to questions and have ideas for building new angles, and also getting other suggestions to improve the product, as we've been doing throughout the time. So this is another way for that to happen. So I just wanted to point that out to people, because it's easy to miss, and it just got added this week.
Nice. Very nice. Let's turn our attention to the handicap feature of the Oaklawn season, and the Oaklawn Handicap that's going to have a prohibitive favorite. How prohibitive? I don't know. 50 cents? 75 cents? Is that prohibitive or not?
Yeah, it's
a storm coming in hot in here, and very much the horse to beat.
Yeah, I mean, certainly looks like, certainly the class of the field, as well as the horse that figures to be the one who just gets to the lead, and they all just try desperately to chase down, and they don't. I don't really. I think we're going to have to stretch a little bit to try to make a case that he gets beat. We could say that it's his first try at Oaklawn, and his only start in the past year outside of California wasn't great. It was that 7th place finish in the Turf Classic at Churchill, a race that was obviously marred by a spill, and so had some excuses in there as well. He like I said, I think he comes out of that really huge race. He comes out of the Santa Anita Handicap. He should dictate from the break, and he's going to be tough to beat. If I'm going to try to beat him with any horse, it's going to be the horse who is outside, Made from Lucky. I would expect Made from Lucky to be close to the pace. He was close last out on Rebel Stakes Day when he was chasing More Spirit in the Essex. Ran a pretty nice race there off the layoff, I thought. And, this angle here, you see a couple of matched angles next to Made from Lucky's name. One of the angles that Lafitte Pinkai actually put in that I now use is the you got Todd Pletcher using Javier, but also the Todd Pletcher second start after a layoff of 45-plus days. A very good angle, one that has worked time and time again. Craig is going to go ahead and take us through how that works. And so, yeah, I mean, you could see the total number of starts there, pretty large sample, 24% win percentage, success score 7.6. ROI is negative, but, again, if you're just looking at volume here in terms of wins and win percentage, it's hard to beat that number. And for one race, I would think that you could make a pretty good case that Made from Lucky does figure to take another step forward here, second off the layoff, and probably poses the most realistic threat to Midnight Storm. The other one that's interesting is, on the rail, you got Texas Chrome, who's been out since the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Prior to that race, it run well, on this circuit. It won the Grade 3 Oklahoma Derby and then the Super Derby before that. It was in over his head in the Dirt Mile, and I think it showed. He's tried sort of similar competition. I mean, he did run in the Matt Winn last year as well, finished third to Gun Runner. I don't think it's impossible to think that he'll find his way into the trifecta here. But first, start off this long layoff, and with the two horses that I just mentioned, I'd have a tough time, making a case for him winning. So that's just those are my feelings on this one.
Yeah. So for me, Made from Lucky is a horse I would take a chance on. Anytime, just my theory. A lot of times, if there's horses that are 1-2, 1-9, any of those odds-on types horses. I look for a good trainer or a good trainer-jockey combination to try to beat him. If a horse looks like he has talent, and as Dan had pointed out, when the one excursion outside of California, the horse didn't do well, so maybe he's California horse only. So it gives me enough confidence to try to go with Made from Lucky because he looks like the obvious second horse. One thing I wanted to point out is that users can always set up their the individual research angles. They can go into customized PPs and go into research and set the way that the angles are displayed in the PPs. And so the way that you do this, when you set up the angles in this research for today's horse, you can determine what's gonna be there based on what you prefer. So for me, when I look at Javier Castellano on this, you'll see that the way I have it set up, that this is a dirt route, and I have it set up that these angles are always going to come up with for today's track. So when you look at Javier Castellano at Oaklawn Park, you can see that out of 5 starts, he has 3 wins and 5 in the money. So all have hit the board. So that in the past year that he's been on live horses every time that come into Oaklawn Park so far. I mean, it's small sample size of 5, but when it's 5 for 5 in the money, that to me is a positive sign. Also, if you look at the one thing about Todd Pletcher, I mean, a lot of times certain good trainers just get overbet. It's not their fault. I mean, there's nothing they can do. I mean, they win at high percentages and just they make a name for themselves. They get a brand name, and so people overbet them. And so it's hard to try to find spots where they do have a positive ROI. But in this case, Todd Pletcher does have a positive ROI. And this is also, I had this set up in the way that I determine the individual research default settings. And so in the past 5 years, second race off a layoff with horses that are 3-year-olds or older, and in a dirt route, 28% of the time they've won, and they have a plus 13% ROI, and that's out of 363 starts, which is a huge sample size for an ROI that positive. So everything about this horse tells you that it's all systems go. I mean, he may not be good enough, but if he's 4-1 or higher odds, he's a horse that you have to play and try to beat the obvious Midnight Storm horse.
I don't know if you have to. I don't know if you have to try to beat him. The one thing that the one thing you do get a little bit here that Castellano is very good at. He'll stay in striking distance. He'll keep Made from Lucky close enough that that he could at least make a run at Midnight Storm. But shortening up. Remember that FNX last year, for instance, he had run in the big cap. He'd had the skin disease that he had the hives that broke out, and he still ran a decent third in the big cap. Then he cut back to the 1 1/8 and was terrific in this race. So I don't know. I don't have nearly as much concern about Phil D'Amato leaving California as I do Sadler. You also get Smith who rode him in the Native Diver and who knows him at this point too. I wouldn't read too much into that trip to Churchill last year. So, but if you in terms of your multis, considering how difficult the Arkansas Derby is going to be, depending on your viewpoint. I mean, there may be people who feel if Classic Empire runs his race, he's a heavily likely winner. But, in terms of approaching the race and the multis, you probably have to make Midnight Storm a strong A, a potential single. Made from Lucky could be a B if you want to go that deep, or, maybe a narrow backup ticket with him. But I think it's a function of how you see, the rest of the races. Don't forget that Whitmore is in this sequence as well, in the Count Fleet, and he's an overwhelmingly likely winner as well. So maybe having Made from Lucky on your tickets in terms of the multis is a bit of a safety valve. Let's do this because there is a race because Pat Pope is a mean racing secretary. He's put a $30,000 starter allowance into the sequence. So let's take a look at this because it does figure in, for those that are going to be working their way toward the Arkansas Derby as the anchor leg in some sequences. So, Dan, what do you think in this 10th race starter?
Yeah, I mean, I like a horse that's 12-1. Chilango. First off the claim, Federico Villafranco. So he claims this horse out of a 5th place finish last out against $15,000 claimers, brings him back in his $30,000 allowance. Now he claimed him last week, so he wheels him back 7 days after the claim. Now, the one really cool thing here is once you click on Villafranco's name, you could do a search here in which you could figure out, well, how does he do when he wheels horses back this quickly? So if you go to the last 5 years, and if you look at days between starts, and do 1 to 7 days, and I think we could pretty much take out most other qualifiers. First after claim, okay.
Should just take a minute here.
There we go. I mean, look at those numbers. 9 starters, 7 of them in the money, and 4 of them have won. So, while the placement kind of seems odd to me, especially off of an effort that maybe doesn't look that great on paper, there's a little bit of a track record here, and anyone around Oaklawn will tell you that honestly, I didn't know the whole rap on him until I got there, but very well respected. He's got another horse in the sequence. He's got a Domain's Rap in the Oaklawn Handicap, a very honest horse who always runs on, one that we should have probably mentioned in the last race if you're looking for another long shot to fill out an exacta. But anyhow, getting back to this one, Trelongo is going to be a pretty nice price. The other thing that I saw here is look, I mean, the horse is 0 for 3 lifetime at Oaklawn, so you may tread lightly. In those last 2 races, though, if you're going to try to build a little bit of a case, he had some excuses. He was in a bit over his head 2 races back and then faded after dueling. And then last out, he was pressed inside and outside through a quarter in 21 and 3 and a half in 44 flat. The pace setter whom he was dueling with faded. And then also in that last race, he also steadied late, or he might have finished better than 5th. And so, another one here who I think I made a case earlier where if you kind of take a look at some of these replays, you start seeing things that aren't necessarily going to be flagged as trip trouble. But, if you watch the race, you get a greater appreciation for the effort they put in. And so this is one that I landed on. And again, looking at the trainer and how well he's done wheeling back horses this quickly, it's got to give you a little bit of confidence.
Do one exercise though, Dan. Take a look the last 90, not 90, call it the last either 30 or 45 days, because there's a little bit of a cloud over that barn.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they have. Well, I mean, right here on the last 30 days, they've won 11% of the time with the plus 26% ROI. That's what shows on this situational stat right there.
Well, there's been an interesting story since March 1st at Oaklawn involving milkshake testing, and that barn got awfully cold awfully quick.
Right.
That's been a kind of an interesting turn of events for Villafranco and Danny Caldwell.
Hmm.
And then there's a horse I like at a price in this race too, and that's the number 4, 20 and 4, and just I just like him for a couple of basic reasons. One is, I rely on the true odds a lot, and you see over here he's the highest ranked. That's what the 1 out of 12 means here. So he's the top ranked horse in the true odds module, and also, as we talked about before, that his last Equibase speed figure was 96. Today's class rating is a 95. So when the speed rating is higher than the class rating, I mean, that tells you that horse is a solid contender. Those horses are always good, and we get my favorite Luis Contreras on as well. So with all those things for me, that he's a horse that I would play in this race. That's the one I recommend.
Karupi, following him around.
But it is funny, like Steve said, somehow it might just go back to your handicapping. I mean, I know when I was growing up, like Chris McCarron, right, one of the greatest all-time Hall of Fame jockeys, I could never win on Chris McCarron. I mean, every time I bet on him, he'd lose. Every time I went against him, he'd beat me. So it's, maybe it's the way you look at horses handicap. I don't know what it is, but, there are jockeys that somehow fall into the way you're handicapping. I don't know really exactly how to explain it, but I know it happens.
Yeah.
I could never win with Pat Day. It took until the end of his career. It was the strangest thing. I'd say the last 2 years of his career, I finally got into at least a little bit of I started to feel at least better about betting him, and always at 7 furlongs. He's the great 7/8 rider in history.
Right. So I think we have a time to look at one more race. So we can look at the 7th race. There's an interesting horse that Dan had in there, so I'll jump to that race.
Yeah, so this is the Count Fleet Grade 3. We already talked a little bit about Mo Candy shipping in for Sadler. I had the same concerns that Steve had addressed a little bit earlier here. This one, Wable, I thought was pretty interesting. This is a horse who really just looked like a completely different horse last out, which was not too far back, just a couple of weeks ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago now. You look at that 108 Equibase speed figure highlighted in yellow there, second highest of his career. His highest was a 111 last March at Oaklawn. I was interested in why Castellano might be taking this mount, and the horse is 12-1 in the morning line. You do have sort of a standout favorite here in Whitmore. So one thing you can do here on stats, specifically here, I was wondering how many times he's been on for Brad Cox in the past few years, and what I could find. So you do a search here, you use today's trainer, and see what comes up. And so you see the 3 starts there and 2 winners. One of them was actually last weekend, or when was the 9th? What was that? Sunday at Keeneland. Arklow, who was actually on the Triple Crown Trail himself for a little while, but finally broke through with Castellano up. And then you've got another winner. And again, these two winners are both within the past month and a half. Chocolate Ride last year, I believe that was in the Woodford Reserve Turf Classic. I think that was another one of them where he had some trip issues there. But either way, I mean, this is obviously a decent sign to me. Has been on 2 horses for Brad Cox over the past couple of months, and he's won with both of them. And so, yeah, I mean, I also, the same friend who mentioned the Randy Morse workmate to me, who finished second today, also ran a little intel for me. And, word is, I mean, that I think, people are high on this horse. But understanding that this is a very tough spot, specifically with the presence of Whitmore to the outside, who, on every count is has consistently run better races, so he'll be but I do think the pace will be hot. You've got Holy Boss in here. You got a horse on the rail named Chief of Staff who's got some speed, and then you've got the Sadler horse. You've got Mo Candy. All of them have got some speed, and I think it could set up pretty well for Whitmore and Wable to be coming late. And I thought that you're going to get a decent enough price here where, if you're looking to play an exacta in this race, those are the 2 horses that I'd put together.
Yeah, just one other thing I wanted to point out too. Let me go back to True Odds. Just for Dan, is we do have this late pace figure here, and so if you sort on this column, I mean, Wable has the highest and Whitmore the second highest, and so this is always a way to, if you're trying to look for closers in a race, it's another kind of an angle that you can look for. You can just sort the horses by late pace and look for those horses maybe to be coming down the lane if you think there's going to be a pace battle. So a lot of times in this race, the race lens thinks the pace, even though there's a lot of front runners, it says the figures may be slow. So I mean that type of race means it's hard to say. When you start having a lot of horses with ease, which means, because this is always the run style here, when you mess over it. I mean, early style. Once you start getting horses, 4 or 5 horses with early style, a lot of times there can be a pace battle. So it's it's a little bit of mixed signals, but whatever you believe, like Dan is thinking, it's going to be a pace battle. The pace is going to melt down. Then obviously the 2 and the 8 are probably the horses to play for sure. And with the odds on the 2 at 12-1, it's probably a nice play. For me, I think that sometimes I might play a race both ways. So for me, I might play some tickets boxing the 2 and the 8, and then I kind of think that Mo Candy, if it goes the way the Racelands projects, is the speed, then I'm going to play Mo Candy on top, and then play the secondary speed, and then the 2 closers underneath. And so I would probably play it both ways. That is a way, that is an approach that some people take. I don't do that too often, but there are times, especially if there's prices to support it either way, I will do that. And that's just the way it is. It's a different way to try to think, oh, I'm always right, the way that I normally handicap, or this one way. The pace can make the race, and so it can unfold 2 different ways, and you're just trying to cover both circumstances. So that's all we had for today, I think. About wraps it up.
Well, a lot of terrific racing, not just waiting for Saturday, but tomorrow, don't forget, you've got the Makers 46 at Keeneland, the Grade 1, and then the Apple Blossom, as well as the Fantasy tomorrow at Oaklawn. So it's a Grade 1 Friday. It's always one of my favorite days of the season in terms of my broadcast, when I can, I typically start out every morning and I say, good Monday, good Tuesday, good Wednesday. I always enjoy tomorrow when I can say Good Friday, literally. So want to remind everybody we got some terrific offers for you. If you're tuning in for the first time, you want to subscribe. The timing is great for April, May, June, Triple Crown season, all the terrific big cards that lie ahead. You buy a month, you get 2 months free. So you get a quarter for the price of 1 month. That's $150 in savings. You should be following the team at Stats Racelands on Twitter, as well as Dan Tordjman, the anonymous man. And then, of course, as Craig talked about, they've got the opportunity to interact and to use the forum as well. We're going to keep you informed on Twitter, offers and angles, things that change as well as opportunities arise. If you have the Twitter feed, you'll be the first to have it, plus the mailers right to your email. And we're going to get together Derby week as well on Thursday of Derby week. We'll obviously have a spirited conversation there with the Derby Day card. So I want to thank everybody. I hope you've been utilizing the information, utilizing the product, poking around, looking under the hood, kicking the tires. Keep digging the angles up and keep trying. We'll look forward, Dan, a quick update on EquestriCon.
Yeah, everything's going really well. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. We just announced this week that a bunch of Kentucky farms are going to be coming up for the convention this summer at Saratoga, August 13th through 15th. Claiborne Farm, Windstar, Denali, just a bunch of really great farms from Kentucky. So you're going to get a taste of Kentucky while you're in Saratoga. Equestricon.com if people want to check it out and learn more about that.
Outstanding. Craig, thanks so much. And everybody, of course, at Stats Racelands and at Equibase. We'll look forward to talking Derby week, everybody. Thanks so much. Good luck today, tonight, tomorrow, this weekend. Talk soon.
Thanks. Good luck.
Thank you.